welcome to the Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning product tour. My name is Ben, and I'm with Sage Intacct. Sage Intacct is the #1 cloud financial management software solution that's built for finance by finance. We're the first and only AICPA preferred financial management solution and #1 in customer satisfaction. This product tour will cover all the critical capabilities that are needed to do budgeting and planning. Topics include how finance teams can use the solution to create a budget structure, collaborate with others, and analyze performance and forecast results. So how does a finance team create a budget, and what are the things every budget should have? Well, in Chapter 1 of this product tour, let's see how Sage Intacct will help you create a budget that will have everything you need. So when it comes to budgets and setting financial goals for the business, finance needs to know how the company is doing. And one of the most common ways of doing this is by comparing budget versus actuals. And at Sage Intacct, where we've spoken with thousands of CFOs and helped them improve the business, here's what we noticed. You have your actuals, and it's in the accounting system. It's also very detailed. It has your chart of accounts, dimensions, and entity information. Now with the budget, that also has accounts, dimensions, and entities, but it's more summarized. And when the budget is more summarized, that means it's going to have fewer lines, less than what you would find in an accounting system. And if your accounting information and budgeting information are kept in different places, it's challenging for finance to compare budget versus actuals, especially if you're using spreadsheets. A lot of time and manual effort is needed to get the information you need so that the numbers line up next to each other in a way that's easy to manage. Here's budget data, here's accounting data, and if you're trying to do budget versus actuals every month, it's not only time-consuming using spreadsheets, but also error-prone. Now, what you're about to see are the following capabilities that a budgeting and planning solution should have in order for a finance team to manage budget versus actuals. Let's take a look. So let me introduce you to Emma Penny, the controller. And Emma is the controller for a company called Clearly. And right now, we're looking at her dashboard since she's a controller. And she can see that as of the end of 2018, she's got a snapshot of her financials right here. So here's her financials, and it's going to show her currently what the actuals are and how they compare to the budget. Now, ideally, what Emma would like to be able to do is to have a budget so that she can do her planning such that the information that's on the accounting side of things, like her accounts, her dimensions, and her entities, all these things she wants to have in sync with her budget while she's doing her planning. And the way she's going to do that is by using Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning to make sure that she's got a structure in place that's always going to ensure that the information is going to be in sync with each other. Let's take a look. So here's Emma, the controller, and right now she's looking at Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning. And it's just an empty startup budget template that she's not going to be using. And what you're about to see is how Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning is going to be able to have a budget structure that's going to be able to understand what the accounting system has in place. And so let's see how that looks right now. And so here's Emma. She's going to create a new budget. And the first thing she's going to do is, from this wizard, actually make a connection to the information that's on the accounting side of things. And she'll have her company ID and her name. And from here, without any programming, she's able to make a connection directly to the accounting side of things so that she can set up her own budget. So since she has actuals for the end of 2018, for this example, let's say that she wants to do a budget just for 2019. And as she's going through this wizard, right now what's happening is that the budgeting and planning application is talking to the accounting system. And it's already going to be able to show her a preview of all the accounts that are in her chart of accounts, just like that. And as she goes through this wizard, she's going to see that it's going to have all her accounts. She has the option to import headcount data or not. And then also she has the option to merge some of the accounts into less detailed budget lines so that she can have the budget look the way that her management wants to look at them. And then as she goes through this wizard, Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning is going to be processing all the information that's sitting on the accounting module. And then it's going to tell her that based on what's currently existing in there right now, they're ready to create the budget structure for her. And so from here, she'll get through the accounts, she'll get through her actuals, and then she can actually pick the dimensions that she wants to budget by. And so, for example, let's just pick the ones that are most common. And then once she picks those dimensions, Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning is going to do its magic. And then while we wait for a few moments, it's just important to note that the way Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning understands the accounting side of things, it's designed so that no programming is required. And it's also designed so that anyone with a finance background can simply connect from a simple web browser, be able to see all the information, the accounts, the dimensions, and the information about the company, and then use all that to create a budget structure. And then when it's done, Emma will have right now just an empty budget template. Now, this is not to suggest that this is how every company is going to do budgeting, but this is really just to demonstrate how, when it comes to doing budget versus actual variances, when there's information that's coming from two different sources, like an accounting system and a spreadsheet budget, it's important to have a system that can understand how to talk to the two things. And what you just saw is an example of how Emma was able to go into the budgeting and planning module, connect to the accounting system, and actually see all the information that's in the accounting system, and then bring all that in so that the structure is always going to be intact. So what you just saw was how a finance leader, Emma, was able to create a budget structure based on the account information in the Sage Intacct accounting module. And with just a few clicks, Emma was able to connect to the accounting module, preview all the accounts and dimensions that she needed for the company budget, and then bring all that into the budgeting and planning module, where her budget and actuals will always have a single place to be used to plan the business. Let's move on. In this chapter of the product tour, we want to look at another challenge for finance teams, which is about planning the business collaboratively. Because once the budget structure is in place, how should a finance team come up with a baseline plan for driving future business growth? Well, in this portion of the product tour, let's see how Sage Intacct will help you prepare your budget so you can update and revise the different assumptions driving the plan and see potentially the overall financial impact to the business. So what are the pains companies experience when there isn't a good system and process in place to plan for growth? Well, we know there's a financial system. And if that system doesn't have the planning functionality you need, then you use Excel to create the budget templates and reports. And when you need to collaborate with others, you use email. And you also attach spreadsheets to collect and share information. And when you have an iterative process involving multiple people to contribute their inputs, passing back and forth of spreadsheets and rolling up information, it can feel like this. And when spreadsheets are used as budget templates, they're error-prone, hard to audit, and don't have process controls. So what you're about to see are the abilities that a budgeting and planning solution should have in order for a finance team to plan the business collaboratively. How a finance team can review the latest actuals and then use that to seed the next year's annual budget, and then how they can work collaboratively on that next year budget together, and then also how a finance team can perform what-if analysis, and then when they're done, export that final budget back to Sage Intacct Core Financials. Let's take a look. So we're back with Emma, and she's looking at her latest budget for Clearly. And as she can see from her latest budget, right now, she's looking at the P&L for her budget, and she's got actuals that run all the way through October 2018. And as I'd mentioned earlier, Emma is getting ready to do the 2019 budget for the new year. And she still needs to pull in her actuals for November and December of 2018 in order to finish finalizing that baseline plan for the 2019 budget. And so what you're about to see is how Emma is going to use the connector to pull in actuals from the accounting module for November and December 2018 with just a few clicks. So she'll sign in to her accounting module. And when she connects to it, she's going to want to import her actuals. She's going to want to import it for her financials. And she's going to want to make sure that she brings in all the dimensions that are applicable for November and December. And after she picks a reporting book, she just wants 2 months. So here, let's do November and December of 2018. Just like that. And meanwhile, the system's going to do all the work for her. No copying, pasting, no exports to Excel, no importing into another spreadsheet. What you're seeing right now is how Sage Intacct is able to use a connector to bring actuals from the accounting module into the budgeting and planning module. So after pulling in actuals for November and December of 2018, Emma has now finished creating her baseline plan for the 2019 budget. Now, to understand what's going on, how those actuals from 2018 are seeding the budget for 2019, let's take a look at the structure of the methods that are in place to calculate that budget. So Emma right now is looking at the budget P&L for 2019. This is her baseline plan for 2019. And here on the left-hand side, she can see all the accounts that are being budgeted for revenues, cost of revenues, and operating expenses. And right now, she's actually looking at the revenue line item, and it's going to be based on subscriptions and services. Now, the thing about Sage Intacct budgeting and planning is that unlike Excel, each budget line, like the one we're looking at right here, is not only going to have the calculated values for all the months, but it's going to show the forecast method and the formula that goes into it. So here, the way to read this line item is that for this subscription revenue, there is an amount, $125,000, that is going to have a growth rate every month for 8%, just like that. And unlike Excel, where you see the number in the cell, but you don't always see the formula that's underlying it unless you're actually in the cell itself, this gives someone like Emma or anyone complete transparency into understanding how the budget is being calculated and what are the assumptions that are going in there. And the other thing that's different from Excel is that anyone can just simply go into this assumption number and just change it, and they can see very quickly what the difference is going to be. And then if this methodology, which is a growth month-over-month rate, is not applicable to what the person's trying to do, they can actually create their own formulas. And these formulas can be based on a set of assumptions that are tailored to what they need to do. And then these assumptions can be used as part of a calculation so that it can calculate the number that needs to occur for this particular line item in the budget. And it's like this for every line item. So here we're looking at revenues. And then if Emma wanted to go to, say, marketing programs, she'll see something that looks similar, except instead of a growth rate that occurs month over month, she'll actually see a number that'll be spread evenly for all the time periods. And then, as you saw in the earlier example, she can change this, or anyone can, and not have to worry about breaking formulas or breaking logic, because Emma will always be able to see what the underlying logic is that's being used to calculate the number. And that's how the 2019 budget is being seeded once the actuals have been put into Sage Intacct budgeting and planning. And so that's what you just saw. Next, in this part of the demo, let's see how Emma would use Sage Intacct budgeting and planning to collaborate with her coworkers. So right now she's looking at marketing programs and the budget line for that. But she has a VP of marketing who she works with that would actually want to be contributing to the budget for this particular department. And unlike Excel or unlike email, where someone would actually have to take a spreadsheet and then attach it to an email and send it back and forth with one another, Emma doesn't need to do that at all. She can simply go to the group of items for marketing, and from here, she can just share it with the person who needs it. And by sharing it, she just needs to enter the name of the coworker who she needs to send it to, and then have them modify it. And then the system will take care of the rest, because what will happen next is that once the VP of marketing actually receives this part of the budget, that VP of marketing can actually go inside and make changes themselves. And let's take a look and see how that is. So here we're looking at the VP of marketing. His name is Ben Franklin. And Ben just received a marketing budget because that's his department. Notice how Emma was able to share a budget without having to reveal anything that's not relevant to this particular person's responsibility, like revenues or maybe one of the other departmental budgets. And so from here, what Ben is able to do is actually go inside and make changes himself. And so here, let's see an example where, since we're looking at the budget for 2019, Ben expects to have to hire a few people in March and April. And this particular set of new hires, let's just, for simplicity's sake, say they're going to have a salary of $100,000 a year. And as you can see right away, Sage Intacct Budgeting Plan was able to capture that information. And once he saves it, when Emma goes back to her budget, she's going to find that the same information that Ben just put in is going to be available from her screen. So let's take a look at that now. So here we're back to Emma, and the VP of Marketing has just made some headcount assumptions that need to be planned for 2019. And what Emma's going to do is, just from her own screen, she can actually see exactly what that VP had done. And when she goes to the line item that the VP had entered, she sees the exact same things. Unlike Excel, where there's going to be a passing back and forth of spreadsheets, that's not the case here. Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning, it's based in the cloud, and then once that change was made, once that data entry was made, anyone who's on the system can see it in real time instantly. Now, Emma doesn't just have to take those changes and accept them without being able to make changes herself. So for example, if Emma wants to continue making changes on top of what Ben had done, the VP of Marketing, she can go to a place like, say, salaries expense, and start entering her assumptions here. And as you'll see, the system's going to be able to calculate it and then update the changes automatically in a top-down manner. So that in this example, anything for taxes that have to do with employment, it's going to be applied at the group level here for salaries, and it'll include and be captured at all the different line items that are being done here. And so you've just seen an example of how someone like Emma, the controller, can collaborate with someone outside of finance, say the VP of Marketing, to work on building a budget together, enter their own assumptions, and then not have to worry about the version control and spreadsheet pains that are normally associated when there's a system that's not in place to do it. Now in this part of the demo, Emma needs to do some what if analysis, because while she's able to collaborate with her coworkers to get their feedback and to get their input on the budget, she too also has some other scenarios that she needs to consider in order to help finalize the budget for 2019. And one of the things that she wants to consider is a scenario in which the company is going to be launching a new offering. And yet it's also not only going to require an investment in marketing, but it's also going to require her ability to have an idea on what the revenue flow will look like. And the way she's going to do that is by creating a what if scenario that's going to look exactly at that. So let's see how she would do that. Well, the first thing she needs to do is look at revenues. And as she looks at revenues, she's going to see here what the preview of cash is going to look like, but she actually wants to see what the preview of the P&L is going to look like. Because in this case, she just needs to give some kind of estimate on what the impact to the P&L is going to be. And for that, what she's going to do is create a new scenario, and she's going to call it upside. And here she can see she's in the upside scenario. And so in order to forecast revenues for the new upside scenario that she just created, she's actually going to use a model that she created in Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning. So here she's got a model that has a set of assumptions. It's got leads, it's got conversion rate, it's got pricing for the different offerings, and it's got a way to convert how many of those leads are going to turn into actual purchases. Now, based on that model, she's actually going to have a forecast of what those values are going to be, say, in the last quarter of 2019. And then here she can see what that estimated revenue is going to be. And she can change any of those things too directly from here. And then once she has that estimate in her model, she can add that to her budget. And since it's part of revenue, she can have that placed right here. And once that's done, and she goes back to her initial screen, she'll see that the revenue number will have been updated. And it had been added because we're in the upside scenario. Now, this scenario isn't actually done yet because in this particular example, there's going to have to be a change in marketing spend if they want to have that kind of an offering. So she can go to marketing programs, and then she can actually change the amount of spending that they want to do. In this case, she can increase it another 50,000. And when it's done, she can save these changes. And then she can actually compare how this upside scenario is doing relative to the other version that she was working on. And for that, let's see an example of how she's just done what-if analysis and can actually compare the two scenarios with each other. So here, she's in her scenarios. She's got the upside that she just did. And what she wants to do is actually compare it to the budget that she was working on. And what Sage Intacct Budgeting Planning will do is actually show line by line in a side-by-side comparison what the delta is for those two scenarios, and then how it's actually going to be impacted for the whole year. So we know that marketing spend was going to be changing for the whole year, but we also know that starting in October, there is going to be an increase to the amount of revenue that was going to take place, all from a single view, all without having to work with spreadsheets, and all without having to deal with the version control and maintenance that's typically necessary when finance people have to do what-if analysis. So that's what you just saw. Now, lastly, in this part of the product tour demo, if Emma wants to actually keep these changes, she can actually merge these changes directly with the working budget that she was working on. And to do that, she can go back to the place that she was working from. And from here, if she picks the scenario dropdown, she can actually merge it with the budget so that these changes will be accepted. So again, unlike spreadsheets, she won't have to worry about the hassle of doing all the maintenance work that usually accompanies it. Now, once that's done, and Emma has worked collaboratively with her peers, she's gotten feedback, and she's ready to finalize the budget will eventually get approved, and then she can send that back to the accounting module. And so what you're about to see is how she would do that. And to do that, she can simply make a connection to Sage Intacct, and then she'll look for the place where the accounting module is. And when she makes that connection, she'll want to export her budget. And she can call this the 2019 final budget, the approved version. And then she can select the time period intervals. And while the system is getting ready to send that over to the accounting module, it's checking it just one more time to make sure the integrity is all in place. And here, she's got 3 dimensions, but for the budget, she only needs 2. and then the system will do all the work for her. Unlike an instance where there's spreadsheets that are used to do something like this, and someone like Emma in finance would actually have to manually track all this and manually do the reporting and then manually get it into the accounting system, that's not the case here. And so right now the system has told us that it's done. And if we go back to the Sage Intacct accounting side of things, here where we see budgets, if we actually refresh this screen as Emma, lo and behold, what you'll find is the new budget that she just exported over from Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning. So what you just saw was how finance leader Emma was able to import the latest actuals from Sage Intacct accounting module to see next year's budget. And the budgeting and planning module automatically calculated every budget line based on the assumptions and formulas that were in place. And then once that was done, Emma was able to share the budget with her coworkers, like the VP of Marketing, to collect inputs for the new budget and then perform what-if analysis to see the financial impact of next year's budget of any new scenario she wanted. And then once the budget was done, Emma was able to export the budget back to the accounting module for managing the day-to-day accounting and reporting. Let's move on. In this chapter of the product tour, we'll address another challenge for finance teams, which is about analyzing performance during the year and then forecasting results for future periods. Now, as finance teams look at actual results and think about the impact of those results to future periods, how should a finance team forecast what those results could be? Well, in this chapter, let's see how Sage Intacct will help you look at business results and then compare them to budget so you can evaluate different scenarios to do a forecast iteratively, quickly, and easily. So what are the pains companies experience when it comes to forecasting? Well, at Sage Intacct, we've noticed that finance teams experience pains when they try to use spreadsheets for this. And it often looks something like this, where there's a combination of actual results and forecast numbers. And these forecast numbers can be calculated values based on formulas or models, values linked to other spreadsheets, or values that might have been entered by hand. Now, whenever a new scenario comes up, like increasing spending or hiring more people, a finance team would have to create another spreadsheet that has actuals and the new forecast. And this cycle continues again and again anytime a new scenario needs to be evaluated to do a forecast. And the more this happens, the harder it is for finance to see and understand the difference from what you were originally forecasting. And then when different scenarios have to live in different spreadsheets, there isn't an easy way to see the financial impact comparatively to see what could happen to the business. So what you're about to see are the following capabilities that a budgeting and planning solution should have in order for a finance team to plan the business. And we'll review the latest budget versus actuals in this one. We'll perform what-if analysis from a forecasting perspective, and then we'll see what the financial impact is to future periods. Let's take a look. So here's Emma. She's back in Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning, and January actuals are now available. And as you can see right now, she's got her budget for all of 2019, and she wants to actually see how it looks with January actuals. And what she'll do is make a connection to Sage Intacct, the accounting module, and then she'll actually want to import her actuals for just January 2019. And while the system is looking at the setup in terms of how the budget structure was done, then she'll get asked in terms of selecting which dimensions she wants to bring in, which in this case is going to be all of them. And then in this case, she just needs it for 1 month, which as we said is going to be for January of 2019. Let's do that here. And just like that. And then the actuals will come in based on what's sitting on the accounting module. And this will just take a few moments. And again, the system is doing all the work for Emma. There is no need for using spreadsheets to do any of this work. And now she has them. She's got January 2019 actuals. Now, what she can do from here is actually look at this latest version, this latest snapshot of how her actuals combined with estimates for the remainder of the year are going to be forecast. And in this example, she can see that while revenues had gone up, there was actually a drop in gross profit because of the expenses that had been incurred. And so what Emma wants to do next is actually perform what-if analysis to see what would happen if there were to be a drop in revenue growth, but to be also at the same time a drop in some of the market spending so that they can get that margin back on track. So let's do that right now and create a new scenario. So here we are with Emma ready to create a new scenario. And as I mentioned earlier, in this example, what she's going to do is see what would happen if some of the assumptions that's currently in the forecast would change. And so the two things that she wants to change is to see what would happen is if the revenue growth for the Boston location were to go, instead of from 8%, if they were to drop to, say, 6%. And at the same time, if marketing spend were to actually decrease for programs. And right now, the amount of marketing spend is at $500,000 a year. And if that were to drop, say, by 50,000, so that it goes to just 450,000 a year, she can have that estimate right here too. And then once that change is done, Emma has a forecast that she wants to compare to the original budget that was in place. And for that, she'll create a scenario here called downside. She'll call this a forecast. And this one will be about lower revenue growth and spending. And she'll add that here. And now that she's got her downcast forecast scenario, she's ready to do a comparison. So she's going to look at her forecast, and then she wants to compare this forecast to what the 2019 budget was. And she can see the difference here in real time to see what would happen to this particular forecast based on the assumptions that she made. And unlike Excel, where something like this would require creating another spreadsheet, going into that second spreadsheet and making changes and then updating them, trying to get the view where you see those two scenarios in a side-by-side comparison is completely eliminated when it comes to the pain that comes with spreadsheets. Because here, what you're seeing with Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning is that all that information is in one place, and that all those informations can be changed incrementally, and the system is going to know how to tell the difference comparatively so that you can see the results in real time without having to wait to do changes to spreadsheets. So what you just saw was how a finance leader, Emma, was able to import the latest January actuals from the Sage Intacct accounting module to see the latest variance analysis between budget and actuals. And then Emma created a new scenario, downside, to see the impact of a new change in assumptions that would reduce revenue growth and reduce spending. And then Emma was able to see the financial impact of that new forecast scenario and then understand how it will look comparatively to the rest of the year, and then also see how it look in comparison to the board-approved budget. Let's move on. In this chapter, let's take a look at an example of customer success using the solution. Red Door Interactive. They're a full-service marketing and advertising agency, and they've been a customer of Sage Intacct since 2015. Now, before Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning, planning was done using multiple cross-linked Excel files, and these files were fragile and highly controlled. You can think of it like operating heavy machinery. You better know what you were doing. And the company had 85 billable staff that they were planning for, and then compared to the prior year, planning would have involved salary changes, headcount increases, and cost changes like benefits and travel. And then making a seemingly simple change could mean hours of work with lots of risk breaking the planning tools using the spreadsheets. But after making the switch to Sage Intacct Budgeting and Planning, they were able to use it during their executive budget discussions. And it was very easy for them to modify their model to handle personnel promotions, staffing increases, and changes in costs. And these changes were able to be handled collaboratively and were done in seconds. And from a system perspective, Sage Intacct was able to preserve all the accounting, budgeting, and planning information for them without the finance person having to bear the burden of managing information themselves. And in terms of how the controller felt, it was like having the ability to make on-the-fly adjustments and then to be able to see those changes dynamically. It was helpful, very insightful. And so in closing, why Sage Intacct? Well, we're the right partner to help in your success. We are the first and only preferred provider of the AICPA. We are the only vendor to have earned this endorsement. And we're also the undisputed leader in customer satisfaction, as evidenced by a rating of 90 out of 100 on G2 Crowd across 2,000 reviews. And we're the undisputed leader in innovation. We're recognized as a visionary by industry analysts. Thank you, and see you next time.